this letter got?
How do you do, sir?
Did you win your case today?
Yes, I did, I'm glad to say.
Well, this gives you great satisfaction to beat Myers, doesn't it?
It gives me satisfaction to beat anyone.
But especially Myers.
Especially Myers. He's such an irritating gentleman. He always seems to bring out the worst in me.
Well, apparently the feeling is mutual. You irritate him no end because you never let him finish a sentence.
And he irritates me because of that infuriating mannerism of his. It's that which drives me to distraction. And he will call me robust. Robust. He's a very able activist. He will need me to remember not to ask leading questions, but he knows damn well he shouldn't do so.
Oh, yes. I brought young Vole along here because I wanted him to tell you his story exactly as he told it to me. There is some urgency in the matter.
Well, my wife thinks I'm going to be arrested. I mean, she may be right. She's much more intelligent than I am.
Arrested for what?
Well, for murder.
Yes, it's the case of Miss Emily French. I presume you've read the reports in the press. She was a maiden lady living alone, but for an elderly housekeeper, in a house in Hampstead. On the night of October the 14th, the housekeeper returned home at approximately 11 p.m. to discover that the house had apparently been broken into and her mistress had been coshed on the back of the head and killed. That is true, isn't it?
That's right. I mean, it's a perfectly ordinary sort of thing to happen nowadays. And then, the other day, the paper said that the police were anxious to interview a Mr. Leonard Vole, who'd been seen with Miss French earlier on the evening in question, and might be able to help them with their inquiries. So, of course, I went along to the police station, and they asked me lots of questions.
Did they caution you?
I don't know. I mean, they said, would I like to make a statement, and they'd write it down, it could be used in court. Is that cautioning me?
Can't be helped now.
Anyway, it sounded damn silly to me. I told them all I could, and they seemed quite satisfied and all that. And then, when I got home and told Romaine, my wife, that is, well, she got the window. She seems to think that they got hold of the idea that I did it. So I thought I'd better get a hold of a solicitor. So I came along to you. I thought you'd be able to tell me what I ought to do about it.
How well did you know this, Miss French?
Oh, very well. I mean, she's been frightfully kind to me. Actually, it was a bit of a bore sometimes, but she meant well. And when I read in the paper that she'd been killed, well, I was frightfully upset. You see, I got rather fond of her.
Go on. Tell Sir Wilfrid, as you told it to me, exactly how you came to make Miss French's acquaintance.
Well, it was one day in Oxford Street. I was walking along the road, minding my own business, and I saw this old lady crossing the street, carrying some parcels. Right in the middle of the road, she drops them. Tried to pick some up, but found a bus almost on top of her. I mean, I shouted. She barely got to the curb in time. Well, I went along and picked the parcels up for her, generally tidied them off, and helped the poor old dear out. You know, that sort of thing.
And she was grateful?
Oh, yes, very grateful. I mean, she thanked me a lot and all that. You know, you'd have thought I'd saved her life instead of her parcel.
But there was actually no question of your having saved her life?
Good Lord, no, nothing heroic or anything. I never expected to see her again. And then, by an extraordinary coincidence, a couple of days later, I was sat behind her in the theatre. She turned around and recognised me. We began talking, and in the end, she asked me to go round and see her.
And you went?
Oh, yes. I was rather churlish to refuse. She urged me to name the day. So I said I'd go round the following Saturday.
So you went to her house at
Hampstead.
Yes, that's right.
How much did you know about her when you first went to the house?
Not that much, really, other than what she told me. She lived alone, hadn't many friends, you know, that sort of thing.
She lived with only a housekeeper?
Yes, that's right. She had 8 cats. 8 of them she had. I mean, the house was beautiful, but it smelt a bit of cats.
Had you reason to believe she was well off?
She spoke as though she did.
And you yourself?
I'm practically stone broke. Have been for a long time.
That's unfortunate.
It is rather, yeah. Oh. You mean they were saying I was only after her for her money?
Oh, well, I shouldn't have put it quite like that, Mr. Vole, but yes, in essence, that is what people might say.
Well, it isn't true, you know. I liked her. She was lonely. Look, I was brought up by my great aunt, my Aunt Betsy. I like old ladies.
You say old ladies, Mr. Vole. Do you know how old Miss Emily French was?
Well, I didn't. But I read in the paper after she was killed that she was 56.
56? You consider that old, Mr. Vole, but I should doubt if Miss Emily French considered that old.
Well, you can't call it a chicken now, can you?
No. Well, let's get on. You went to see her quite frequently?
Yes. I should probably say once or twice a week.
Did you take your wife to see her?
No.
Why didn't you?
I don't know. Well, to be quite frank, I don't think it would have gone down very well if I had.
Do you mean with your wife or with Miss French?
Oh, with Miss French.
Go on.
Well, you see, she had grown rather fond of me.
You mean she fell in love with you?
No, good Lord, no. No, nothing like that. No, just, sort of mothered me, pampered me, that sort of thing.
You see, Mr. Vole, I have no doubt that part of the police case against you, if there is a case against you, will be why did you, young, good-looking, married, devote so much of your time to an elderly woman with whom you could hardly be said to have very much in common?
Yes, I know. They'll say I was only after her for her money. No secret of the fact that she was rolling in cash. As I told you, Romaine and I, we are pretty tight. And I had thought that if ever I was in a really rough spot, she'd help me out. I'm being honest about it.
Did you ever ask her for a loan?
No, I didn't. No. I mean, things weren't that tough. Of course, I can see it does look rather bad for me.
Miss French knew you were a married man?
Yes.
But she never suggested that you should take your wife to see her?
No. Well, you see, she'd grown rather fond of... No, bugger. She seemed to take it for granted that my wife and I didn't get on.
Did you give her that impression deliberately?
No, I didn't. Indeed, I didn't. She just seemed to, assume it. Look, I wasn't trying to get money from her, really. But I'd invented this new gadget for the car. And I thought that if she would invest in that, it would still be her money. And she might even get some money back. Look, I wasn't trying to sponge from her so often. Really, I wasn't.
What money did you obtain at any time from Miss French?
None. None at all.
Tell me about the housekeeper.
Janet Mackenzie. Now there's a regular old timer. I mean, she looked after me, poor Miss French and all that, but the poor old dear couldn't call her soul her own when Janet was around. And I don't think Janet liked me at all.
Why didn't she like you?
I don't know. Jealous, I expect. And I don't think she liked me helping Miss French with her business affairs either.
So you helped Miss French with her business affairs?
Oh, yes. I helped her with lots of things like that. She had a few investments that she wasn't happy with. Filling out forms, that sort of thing. I helped her a lot with things like that.
Now, Mr. Vole, I'm going to ask you a very serious question, and it's one to which it's vital I should receive a truthful reply. You were in low water financially. You had the conduct of this lady's affairs. Now, did you at any time convert to your own use any of the securities that you handled? Now, wait a minute, Mr. Vole, before you reply, because, you see, there are 2 points of view here. Either we can make a feature of your probity and your honesty, or if you swindled the woman in any way at all, then we must take the line that you had no motive for murder, since you already had a profitable source of income. You see, there are advantages in either point of view. What I want is the truth. Now, take your time if you wish before you answer.
I assure you, Sir Wilfrid, I played it dead straight, and you won't find anything to the contrary. Dead straight.
Thank you, Mr. Vole. You relieve my mind very much. I pay you the compliment of believing that you are far too intelligent to lie over such a very vital matter. Now, we come to the evening of October the 14th. Did Miss French ask to see you that night?
No, she didn't, as a matter of fact. But you see, I found this new gadget that I thought Miss French might like. So I popped up there. About 7:45 I got there. It was Janet Mackenzie's night off. So I knew she'd be alone and might be rather glad of the company.
It was Janet Mackenzie's night out and you knew that fact?
Yes. Maybe I knew Janet went out every Friday night.
That's not so good.
Why not? I mean, it seems a perfectly natural night for me to choose to go and see her.
Go on, Mr. Vole.
Well, I got there at 7:45, as I said. Miss French had dinner. But we had coffee together. Then we played a game of double dealing. And after that, about 9 o'clock, I said goodnight to her and left.
But I thought you said the housekeeper had said she'd come home earlier that evening.
Yes, that's right. That's what the police said. They said that Janet had come home for something she'd forgotten. And she said, or at least she said she heard someone talking to Miss French. Well, whoever that was, it wasn't me.
Can you prove that, Mr.
Yes,
Bolt?
of course I can. I was at home with Romaine by then. I mean, that's what the police kept asking me. Where was I at 9:30? I mean, some nights you wouldn't remember, would you? But on this occasion, I distinctly recall I'd gone straight home to Romaine, and we haven't gone out again.
You live in a flat?
Yes, that's right. Excuse me. A tiny shop above a shop behind Euston Station.
And did anyone see you returning to the flat?
No, I don't suppose so. Why should they?
Well, it might have been useful if they had.
But surely you don't think. I mean, if the police really think she was killed at 9:30, then my wife's evidence is all I need. Isn't it?
And you're quite sure that your wife will definitely say that you arrived home that time in the evening?
Yes, of course she will.
Do you love your wife? And, more to the point, does she love you?
Romaine is absolutely devoted to me. She's the most devoted wife a man could have.
So you would say you are happily married?
Couldn't be happy. Romaine is wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I would like for you to know her, Mr. Maiden.
I think it would be advisable if we have a meeting with your wife.
Do you mean have a regular round-the-table conference?
I wonder, Mr. Vold, if you're taking this business seriously enough.
I am. Truly I am. But, I mean, it seems so much like a bad dream. That this should be happening to me. Murder. It's a thing you read about in books and newspapers. But it's not something that you could ever think could happen to you or touch you in any way. I mean, that's probably why I'm making a joke about it. But it isn't a joke, really.
No, I'm afraid it is not a joke.
But I mean, it's all right, isn't it? Because if the police really think that she was killed at 9:30, and I was at home with Romaine.
How did you get home that evening? By bus or underground?
I walked. Took me about 25 minutes. It was nice though. A bit windy.
Did anyone you know saw you along the way?
No, I don't suppose so. But does it matter? I mean,
The
Romaine!
evidence of a devoted wife, unsupported by any other evidence, is not always convincing, Mr. Bold.
You mean they'd say that Romaine would lie on my account?
Well, it has been known, Mr. Bold.
You know, I'm sure she would too. Only in this case she won't, will she? Because it really is the truth. Oh, look, you do believe me, don't you, Sir Walter?
I believe you, yes. But it's not me you'll have to convince. You are aware, are you not, that Miss French left a will leaving you all her money?
Left all her money to me? You're joking.
I am not joking. It's in tonight's evening paper. There.
Well, I can hardly believe it.
You knew nothing of this?
Nothing. She never said a word.
And you're absolutely sure you knew nothing about this?
Absolutely nothing. I'm very grateful to her and all that. And yet, in a way, I rather wish now she hadn't. It's a bit it's a bit awkward as things are now.
Well, it provides you with a very adequate motive. If you knew about it, which you say you did not, Miss French never spoke to you about making a will?
No. She did say once to Janet, "Oh, you're afraid I'll make my will again, aren't you?" But I mean, that was nothing to do with me. It was just a bit of a bust-up between the two of them. Do you really think they're going to arrest me, Sue?
I think that is an eventuality that you must prepare yourself for, Mr. Bold.
You will do your best for me, won't you, sir?
Don't worry, my boy. You may rest assured I shall do everything in my power to help you. Don't worry, we'll do our best.
And then there's Romaine. It'll be terrible for her. She'll be in a dreadful state. You will look after her too, won't you?
Yes, all right. Don't worry. Don't worry at all. Okay?
And then there's the money side of things too. That worries me. I mean, I've got a few quid, but it's not much. I mean, perhaps I ought to have come to you for any help in the first place.
We will be able to put up an adequate defence. The court does provide for these cases, you know.
You know, I can't believe it. I can't believe that I, Leonard Bold, could be standing in that dock, saying not guilty. People staring at me. I can't see why they don't think it was a burglary. I mean, apparently the window was forced and smashed, and things strewn all over the room. I saw the papers say it seems much more probable.
The police must have a very good reason for believing that it was not a burglary.
But I can't see why they...
I'm Inspector Hearn. I have a warrant for your arrest on the charge of murdering Miss Emily French on October 14th last. I must warn you that anything you say may be taken down and used in evidence.
Okay. I'm ready.
Good afternoon, Inspector. My name is Mr. Mayhew, and I will be representing Mr. Ball.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayhew. That's all right, sir. We'll take him along now and charge him.
I must say, John, that young man's in a worse fix than he seems to think. Have a seat.
Yes, I think so too. How does he strike you?
Extraordinarily naive, and yet shrewd in some ways, intelligent, I should say. But he certainly doesn't realise the danger of his position.
Do you think he did it?
I don't know. On the whole, I should say not. You agree?
I agree.
Well, he seems to have convinced both of us favourably. I can't think why. I've never heard a weaker story. God knows what we're going to do with it. The only evidence in his favour is that of his wife. And who is going to believe his wife?
Well, it has been known to happen, though.
Yes, and she's a foreigner too. 9 out of 12 in the jury box don't believe a foreigner. She'll be emotional and upset. She won't understand a word the prosecution counsel is saying to her. We'll have to interview her, I suppose. You see, she'll have hysterics.
Well, of course, if you'd rather not accept the brief.
You'll say I won't accept the brief, just because I say the boy's got an absolute tomfool story to tell.
Nevertheless, a true one.
Yes, it must be true. It couldn't be so idiotic if it wasn't true. But you put all those facts down in black and white, and the whole thing is utterly damning. And yet, when you speak to the boy, and he blurts out all those facts, you realise that it just could happen as he said. Damn it, I have the equivalent of an Aunt Betsy myself. I loved her dearly.
Yes, he's got a good personality. Sympathetic, I think.
Yes, and that should go down well with the jury, but it cuts no ice with the judge. And he's the simple sort of fool that will get easily hassled in the box.
I am Mrs. Bull.
Ah, my dear Mrs. Ball.
Are you Mr. Mayhew?
Yes, I am. And this is Sir Wilfrid Roberts, who will be representing your husband.
How do you do, Sir Wilfrid?
How do you do?
I have just come from the office, Mr. Mayhew. They told me that you were here this morning.
Quite.
Just as I was arriving, and I thought I saw Leonard getting into a police car.
Now, my dear Mrs. Bowl, you must not upset yourself. Won't you sit down?
Thank you.
Now, there is nothing to be alarmed about as yet, and you must not give way.
Oh no, I shall not give way.
And then let me tell you, as perhaps you already suspect, your husband has just been arrested.
For the murder of Miss Emily French.
I'm afraid so, yes, but you must not get upset.
You keep saying that, Sir Wilfrid, but I am not upset.
No, I can see you have great fortitude.
You can call it that, if you like.
The great thing is to look at all these things in a calm manner.
Yes, that suits me very well. But you must not try and hide anything from me, Sir Gilbert. You must not try and spare me. I want to know everything. I want to know the worst.
Splendid. That's the way to tackle things. Now, dearie, we're not going to give way to alarm or despondency. We're going to look at all these things in a sensible and straightforward manner. Your husband, then, became friendly with Miss French about 6 weeks ago. You were aware of that friendship?
He told me that he had rescued an old lady and her parcel one afternoon in the middle of a crowded street. He told me that she had asked him to go and see her.
All very natural, I think, and he went.
Yes.
And they became good friends.
Evidently.
There was no question of your accompanying your husband on any occasion?
Leonard thought it better not.
Leonard thought it better not. Yes, just between ourselves, why did he think it better not?
He thought Miss French would prefer it that way.
Yes, well, we can go into that some other time. Your husband then became friends with Miss French. He did various little services for her. She was a lonely old woman with time on her hands, and she found your husband's companionship congenial to her.
Leonard can be very charming.
I'm sure he can. He felt, no doubt, it was a kindly action on his part to go and cheer up the old lady.
I dare say.
You yourself had no objection to your husband's friendship with this old lady?
I do not think I objected, no.
And you have, of course, perfect trust in your husband, knowing him as well as you do.
Oh, yes, I know Leonard very well.
I can't tell you, Mrs. Cole, how much I admire your calm and your courage, knowing as I do how devoted you are to your husband.
So, you know how devoted I am to Leonard?
Indeed, yes.
But excuse me, I am a foreigner. I do not always understand your English terms. But is there not something, a saying about knowing something of your own knowledge? You do not know that I am devoted to Leonard of your own knowledge, do you, Sir Gilbert?
No, that is of course true, but your husband told me.
Leonard told you how devoted I am to him?
Indeed he did. He spoke of your devotion in the most moving terms.
Men I often think are very stupid.
I beg your pardon?
It does not matter. Please go on.
This Miss French was a woman of some considerable wealth. She had no near relations. Like many elderly eccentric ladies, she was fond of making wills. She'd made several in her lifetime. Shortly after meeting your husband, she made a fresh will. After some small bequests, she left the whole of her fortune to your husband.
Yes.
You were aware of that fact?
I read it in this evening's paper.
Yes, but before you read it in the paper, you had no idea, your husband had no idea.
Is that what he said?
Yes, it is. You don't suggest anything different?
No. Oh, no, I do not suggest anything.
There seems to be no doubt that Miss French looked upon your husband rather in the light of a son, or shall we say, a very favourite nephew.
You think Miss French looked upon Leonard as a son?
I think so, yes. Very definitely I think so. I think that could be regarded as quite natural, quite normal under the circumstances.
What hypocrites you are in this country.
My dear Mrs. Ball.
I shock you? I'm so sorry.
Of course. You have a continental way of looking at these things. But I assure you, my dear Mrs. Ball, that is not the line to take. It would be most unwise to suggest in any way at all that Leonard Vole, that Miss French had any feelings for Leonard Vole, other than those of, shall we say, a mother or an aunt.
Oh, by all means, let us say an aunt if you think it best.
One must think of the effect on the jury of all these things.
Yes, I also wish to do that. I have been thinking of that a good deal.
Quite. Now, we come to the evening of October the 14th. That is just over a week ago. You recall that evening?
Oh, yes, I remember it very well.
Leonard Vole went to see Miss French that night. The housekeeper, Janet Mackenzie, was out. Leonard Vole played a game of double demon with Miss French and finally took his leave from her at about 9 o'clock. He returned home on foot, he tells me, arriving at about 25 minutes past 9.
25 past 9.
At 9:30, the housekeeper returned to the house to collect something she'd forgotten. On passing the sitting room door, she heard Miss Mackenzie in conversation with a man. She assumed that man was your husband. And according to Inspector Hearn, it is this statement of the housekeeper's which has led to your husband's arrest. Your husband tells me, however, that he has an absolute alibi for that time, in that he was at home with you at 9:30. That is true, is it not? He was home with you at 9:30.
Is that what Leonard says, that he was at home with me at 9:30?
Yes, you don't suggest anything else?
It is true, but of course.
Perhaps the police have already questioned you on this point.
Oh, yes, they came to see me yesterday evening.
And you said?
I said, Leonard came in at 25 minutes past 9 and did not go out again.
You said? Oh.
That is right, is it not?
What do you mean by that?
That is what Leonard wants me to say, is it not?
Yes, but what do you mean by that? It's true, you said so yourself just now.
I have to understand, to be sure. If I say, yes, it is so, Leonard was at home with me at 9:30, will they acquit him? Will they let him go?
If you are both speaking the truth, then yes, they will have to acquit him.
But when I said that to the police, I do not think they believed me.
What makes you think they didn't believe you, Mrs. Vole?
Perhaps I did not say it very well.
Mrs. Vole, I don't think I quite understand your attitude in all
So you
this.
do not understand. Well, perhaps it is difficult.
Perhaps you do not understand the position of your husband.
I have already said that I wish to understand fully just how black the case against my husband is. I say to the police, Leonard was at home with me at 9:30. They do not believe me. But perhaps someone saw him leave Miss French's house that evening, or saw him in the street on his way home.
Your husband cannot think of or remember anything of that usefulness, I'm afraid.
So, it will be only his word and mine. And mine. Thank you. That is what I wanted to know.
But please, Mrs. Vole, don't go. There is a lot more to be discussed.
Not by me.
Why not, Mrs. Vole?
I shall have to swear, shall I not, to tell the truth and all the truth and nothing but the truth.
That is the oath you take.
And supposing then that when you ask me what time did Leonard Ball come home that night, I should say...
Well?
But there are so many things I could say.
Mrs. Vole, do you love your husband?
Leonard says I do.
Leonard Vole believes so.
But then Leonard is not very clever.
You do realise that you cannot by law be called to give testimony damaging to your husband?
How very convenient.
And your husband
He
cannot
is not my husband.
What?
Leonard Ball is not my husband. He went through a form of marriage with me in Berlin. He got me out of the Russian zone and brought me safely to this country. I did not tell him, but I had a husband living at the time.
He brought you out of the Russian sector and safely to this country? You should be grateful to him. Are you?
One can get very tired of gratitude.
Mrs. Vole, has your husband ever injured you in any way?
Leonard injured me. He rushes the ground I walk.
And you?
You want to know too much.
Let's just clarify a few things, shall we? Your statements have been somewhat ambiguous. What exactly did happen on the evening of October the 14th?
Leonard came at 25 minutes past 9 that night and did not go out again. I had given him an alibi. Have I not?
You have. Mrs. Vole,
Yes.
you are a very remarkable woman.
And you are satisfied? I am.
I'm damned if I'm satisfied.
Nor I.
She's up to something, that woman. But what? Tell me that, John.
Well, she certainly didn't have hysterics all over the place, that's for sure.
Cool as a cucumber.
What's going to happen if we put her in the witness box?
God knows.
The prosecution will break her down in no time, especially if it were Myers.
Well, if it's not the Attorney General, it probably will be.
Then what's your line of attack going to be?
The usual. Keep interrupting. As many objections as possible.
The thing is that Leonard Vole is convinced of her devotion.
Yeah, but don't put your trust in that, my boy. Any woman can fool a man if she wants to, and if he's in love with her.
Oh, he's in love with her, all right.
More fool he. Never trust a woman.
I swear by Almighty God that I will well and truly try and duly deliverance make between our sovereign lady the Queen and the prisoner at the bar, whom I shall have in charge, and true verdict give according to the evidence.
Leonard Vole, you are charged on indictment for that you, on the 14th day of October in the county of London, murdered Emily Jane French. How say you, Leonard Vole? Are you guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Members of the jury, the prisoner stands indicted for that he, on the 14th day of October, murdered Emily Jane French. To this indictment, he has pleaded not guilty, and it is your charge to say, having heard the evidence, whether he be guilty or not.
One moment, please, Mr. Myers. Members of the jury, the proper time for me to sum up the evidence to you and instruct you as to the law is after you have heard all the evidence. But because of the considerable amount of publicity associated with this case in the press already, I should just like to say this to you now. By the oath which each of you has just taken, you swore to try this case on the evidence. That means the evidence that you are about to see and to hear. It does not mean that you are to consider also anything you may have heard or read before taking your oath. You must not consider anything except what you will hear in this courtroom. You must put from your minds everything which influences you in favour of or against the prisoner. Now, I am quite sure that you will manage to carry out your duty conscientiously
May it please you, my lady, members of the jury, I appear in this case for the prosecution and my learned friend Sir Wilfrid Robards for the defence. This is a case of murder. Facts are simple and up to a certain point are not in dispute. You will hear how the prisoner, a young, and you may think a not unattractive man, made the acquaintance of Miss Emily French, a woman of 56. How he was treated by her with kindness and with affection. The nature of that affection you will have to judge for yourselves. Dr. Wyatt will tell you that in his opinion, the death occurred sometime between 9:30 and 10 on the evening of October the 14th last. You will hear the evidence of Miss Janet Mackenzie, Miss French's loyal, devoted housekeeper. The 14th of October, it was a Friday, was Miss Mackenzie's night out, but on this occasion she happened to return for a few minutes at 9:25. Let herself in with a key. Upon going upstairs to her room, she passed the door of the sitting room. She will tell you that in the sitting room she heard the voices of Miss French and the prisoner, Leonard Bow.
That's not true, it wasn't me!
Janet Mackenzie was surprised, since, as far as she knew, Miss French had not expected Leonard Bow to call that evening. However, she went out, and when she returned at 11 that evening, she found Miss Emily French murdered, the room in disorder, a window smashed, and the curtains blowing wildly. Horror-stricken, Janet Mackenzie called the police. I should tell you that the prisoner was arrested on the 20th of October. It is the case of the prosecution that Miss Emily French was murdered between 9:30 and 10 p.m. on the evening of October the 14th by a blow from a cosh. And that blow was struck by the prisoner, Leonard Bow. I will now call Inspector Hearn.
Inspector Hearn.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence that I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Roberta Hearn, Inspector, New Scotland Yard.
Now, Inspector Hearn, on the evening of October the 14th last, were you on duty when you received an emergency call?
Yes, sir.
And what did you do?
With Sergeant Randall, I proceeded to 23 Ashburn Road. I was admitted to the house and established that the occupant, whom I later ascertained as Miss Emily French, was dead. She was lying on her face and had received severe injuries to the back of her head. An attempt had been made to force one of the windows with an implement that might have been a chisel, and the window was broken near the catch. There was glass strewn about on the floor, and I also found later fragments of glass on the ground beneath the window.
Is there any particular significance in finding glass both on the inside and the outside of the window?
The glass outside the window is not consistent with the window having been forced from the outside.
You mean that if it had been forced from the inside, there had been an attempt made to make it look as though it had been forced from the outside?
I object. My learned friend is putting words into the mouth of the witness.
You have been engaged, have you not, on several cases of burglary and housebreaking?
Yes, sir.
And in your experience, when the windows have been forced from the outside, where is the glass?
On the inside.
In any other cases where the windows have been forced from the outside, have you found glass on the outside of the window or at some distance below on the ground?
No.
Will you go on?
A search was made, photographs were taken, and the place was fingerprinted.
And what fingerprints did you discover?
Those of Miss Emily French herself, those of Miss Janet Mackenzie, and those of Leonard Bow, the prisoner.
No others?
No others.
Did you subsequently have an interview with Mr. Leonard Bow?
Yes, sir. Janet Mackenzie was unable to give me his address, but as a result of a newspaper appeal and a broadcast, Leonard Bow came and saw me.
And on October the 20th, when arrested, what did the prisoner say?
He replied, Okay, I'm ready.
Now, Inspector, you say that the room had the appearance of a robbery having been committed.
That is just not what the inspector said. If my ladyship would remember, that is a suggestion made by my learned friend, and quite improperly made, to which I objected.
You are quite right, Sir Wilfrid, but at the same time, I'm not sure that the inspector is not entitled to give evidence of any facts which may tend to prove that the disorder of the room was not the work of a person who broke in from the outside with the intention of robbery.
My lady, may I respectfully agree with your ladyship's version, but I'm talking about facts, yes, not opinion. Not the mere expression of opinion even, without even the facts upon which it is based.
Perhaps, my lady, if I phrase the question in this way, my learned friend would be satisfied. Inspector, could you say, from what you saw, whether there had or had not been a bona fide breaking in from the outside?
My lady, I really must continue my objection.
Yes,
My learned friend is again seeking to obtain an opinion on this witness.
Yes, Mr. Myers, we'll have to do just a little better than that.
Inspector, did you find anything inconsistent with a breaking in from the outside?
Only the glass, sir.
Nothing else?
No, sir, nothing else.
Well, we all seem to have drawn a blank there, Mr. Myers.
Was Miss French wearing jewellery of any value?
Yes, she was wearing 2 diamond rings and a diamond brooch, value of about £90,000.
And these were left untouched?
Yes, sir.
Was in fact anything taken?
According to Janet Mackenzie, nothing was missing.
Now, in your experience, when anyone breaks into a house, do they leave without taking anything?
Not unless they're interrupted, sir.
But in this case, it does not seem that the burglar was interrupted.
No, sir.
Do you produce a jacket, Inspector?
Yes, I do, sir.
Is that it?
Yes, that's it.
And from where did you get it?
I got it from the prisoner's flat, sir, sometime after he was arrested, and handed it to Mrs. Clegg at the lab to test for possible bloodstains.
Lastly, Inspector, do you produce the will of Miss Emily French?
Yes, I do.
Dated October the 8th?
That's correct.
And after certain bequests, the residue is left to the prisoner?
That's correct, sir.
What will be the net value of that estate?
The net value, as far as can be ascertained at the moment, will be around about £500,000.
Now, Inspector, you say that the only fingerprints found in the room were those of Miss Emily French, the prisoner Leonard Vole, and Janet Mackenzie. In your experience, when a burglar breaks in, does he usually leave fingerprints, or does he wear gloves?
He wears gloves.
Invariably?
Almost invariably.
So the absence of fingerprints in any particular case of burglary would hardly surprise you.
No, sir.
Now, these chisel marks on the window, were they on the inside or the outside of the casement?
On the outside, sir.
And isn't that consistent, and only consistent, with a break-in from the outside?
He could have made those marks afterwards, going outside the house, or he could have made those marks from the inside.
From the inside, Inspector? Now, how could he possibly do that?
The 2 windows there are together, both casements with the catches adjacent. It would be easy for anyone inside to lean out and force the lock of the other.
Tell me, Inspector, did you find any chisel near the premises or at the prisoner's flat?
Yes, sir, at the prisoner's flat.
Oh?
But it didn't fit the marks on the window.
It was a windy night, was it not, October the 14th?
I really can't remember, sir.
According to my learned friend, Janet Mackenzie has said that she noticed that the curtains were blowing. Perhaps you noticed that yourself, Inspector?
Yes, sir, they were blowing about a bit.
Indicating that it was a windy night.
Yes, sir.
I suggest that if a burglar had forced the window from the outside and swung it back, some of the loose glass might easily have fallen down outside the window having been forced back by the wind. That is possible, is it not?
Yes, sir.
Now, crimes of violence, as we are all too aware, have been much on the increase lately. You would agree with that, Inspector?
They've been a little above normal, sir.
Yes. Now, let us take the case that if some young thugs had broken in and intended to attack Miss French and steal, it is possible that if one had cautioned her They might all give way to panic and leave without taking anything. Or they could be simply looking for money and would be afraid to take anything in the nature of jewellery.
I submit that it is quite impossible for Inspector Hearn to guess at what went on in the minds of some entirely hypothetical young criminals who may not even exist.
The prisoner came forward of his own accord and gave his statement quite willingly.
Yes, sir.
And is it the case that at all times the prisoner has protested his innocence?
Yes, sir.
Inspector Hearn, will you kindly examine that knife? You have seen that knife before?
I may have done.
This is the knife that was taken from Leonard Vowles' kitchen and was first brought to your attention by the prisoner's wife when she was first interviewed by you.
Larry, to save the time of the court, may I suggest that we accept this knife as being the knife in the possession of Leonard Vowles and shown to the inspector by Mrs. Vowles?
Yeah, that is correct, Inspector.
Yes, sir.
It is known, I believe, as a French vegetable knife.
I believe so, sir.
Just test the edge of the knife. Carefully now. You will agree that the edge and the point are razor sharp?
Yes, sir.
And if you were cutting ham, slicing it, let us say, and your hand slipped with that knife, it would be capable of inflicting a very nasty cut, and one which would bleed profusely.
I object. That is a matter of opinion, and medical opinion at that.
I withdraw the question. I will ask you instead, Inspector, if the prisoner, when questioned by you as to the stains on the sleeves of his jacket, drew your attention to a recently healed scar on his wrist and told you that it had been caused by him whilst slicing ham with a household knife.
That's what he said.
And you were told the same thing by his wife.
The first time. Afterwards...
A simple yes or no, please. Did the prisoner's wife show you this knife and tell you that her husband had cut his wrist with it whilst slicing ham?
Yes, sir.
What first drew your attention to that jacket, Inspector?
The sleeves appear to have been recently washed, sir.
And you were told this story about an accident with the kitchen knife?
Yes, sir.
Your attention was drawn to the scar on the prisoner's wrist?
Yes, sir.
Granted that the scar was made by this particular knife, there is nothing to show whether that was done deliberately or was indeed an accident.
Really, my lady, if my learned friend is going to answer his own questions, the presence of the witness seems superfluous.
I withdraw the question. Thank you, Inspector. Dr. Wyatt.
Dr. Wyatt.
I swear by mighty God that the evidence I shall give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
You are Dr. Wyatt?
Yes.
You're a police surgeon attached to the Hampstead Division.
Yes.
Will you kindly tell us what you know regarding the death of Miss Emily?
Yes, on the night of October the 14th at 11 o'clock, I was called to see the dead body of a woman who subsequently proved to be Miss Emily French. By examination of the body, I was of opinion that death had resulted from a blow on the head from an object such as a cosh. Death would have been practically instantaneous. By the temperature of the body and other factors, I estimated that the time of death had been not less than an hour previously, and not more than an hour and a half. That is between the hours of 9:30 and 10 o'clock.
Had Miss French struggled with her adversary at all?
There was no evidence to that effect, no. I should say, on the contrary, she'd been taken quite unprepared.
Doctor, where exactly on the head had this blow been struck? There was only one blow, was there not?
Yes, only one. On the left side at the asterion.
I beg your pardon, where?
The asterion, the junction of the parietal, temporal and occipital bones.
Yes, and in layman's language, where is that?
Well, behind the left ear.
Would that indicate that the blow had been struck by a left-handed person?
It's difficult to say. The blow appeared to have been struck directly from behind because the bruising ran perpendicularly. But I should say it's impossible to say whether it was struck by a right or a left-handed man.
We do not know as yet, Doctor, that it was a man. But will you agree, from the position of the blow, it is more likely than not to have been struck by a left-handed person?
Well, that is possibly so, but I would prefer to say that it is uncertain.
At the moment that the blow was struck, would blood have been likely to get onto the hand or arm that had struck the blow?
Yes, certainly.
And only on that hand or arm?
Well, probably only on that hand and arm, but it's difficult to be dogmatic.
Quite so, Dr. White. Now, would great strength have been needed to strike such a blow?
No, from the position of the wound, no great strength would have been required.
It would not necessarily, therefore, have been a man that could have struck the blow. It could easily have been a woman.
Yes, certainly.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor. Call Janet Mackenzie.
Janet Mackenzie. Other hand.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Your name is Janet Mackenzie.
Aye, that's my name.
You were the companion housekeeper to the late Miss French.
Oh, I was a housekeeper. I was not a companion, no time for companions. Poor feckless bodies, afraid to do a bit of honest domestic work.
Quite so. Quite so. I meant only that you were held in esteem and affection by Miss French. You were on friendly terms together, not quite those of mistress and servant.
20 years I've been with her and looked after her. She knew me, and she trusted me. Many the time I prevented her from doing a foolish action.
What sort of a person was Miss French?
Oh, she was a warm-hearted body. Too warm-hearted for her own good, I'm thinking. A wee bit impulsive. Sometimes she'd have no sense at all. She was easily flattered, you see.
When did you first see the prisoner, Leonard Vaux?
I mind it was towards the end of August.
And how often did he come to the house?
Oh, in the beginning once a week, and then oftener. 2 or maybe 3 times a week. Oh, he'd sit there flattering her, laughing at her jokes, telling her about her new clothes.
Right. Now, will you tell us, in your own words, about the events of October the 14th?
It was a Friday, and my night out. I'd arranged to meet friends of mine in Glenister Road, which was no but 3 minutes' walk away. I left the house at 7:30. I promised to take my friend a pattern of a knitted cardigan she'd much admired. Well, when I got there, I found that I'd left it at home. So after supper, I said I'd slip back and get it, because it was a fine night and only a few minutes' walk back. I got back to the house at 9:25. I let myself in with my key, went upstairs, and as I passed the sitting room, I heard the prisoner in there talking with Miss French.
You're quite sure it was the voice of the prisoner you heard?
Oh, I know his voice well enough. Number of times he's come to the house. Pleasant enough voice, I suppose. Anyway, no business of mine. So I went upstairs, got my pattern, came down, let myself out again, and went back to my friends.
Now, I do want these times very exact. You say that you re-entered the house at 9:25.
Aye. I left my friend's house at 9:20.
And how do you know that, Miss Mackenzie?
By the clock on her mantelpiece, and I compared it to my watch, and the time was the same.
And you say it takes 3 or 4 minutes to walk to the house, so you entered the house at 9:25, and you were there for...
Oh, I was there not 10 minutes. I had to search for my pattern because I wasn't quite certain where it was, you see.
And what did you do next?
Well, I went back to my friends in Glenister Road, and I stayed there until 11 when I said goodnight and I came home. And as I passed the sitting room door, I thought, well, I'd look in and see if Miss French wanted anything before I went to bed.
And what did you see?
Oh, the poor body lying on the floor with her head all beaten in, and the drawers of the bureau all out, and everything scattered hither and thither, and the bars broken on the floor, and the curtains billowing in the wind.
What did you do?
I called the police.
Did you really think that a burglary had occurred?
Really, my lady, I must protest.
Yes, Mr. Myers, I will not allow that question to be answered. It should not have been put to the witness.
Then let me ask you this, Miss Mackenzie. What did you do after you telephoned the police?
Oh, I searched the house.
What for?
For an intruder.
And did you find one?
No, nor any sign of disturbance either, save in the sitting room.
How much did you know about the prisoner Leonard Vaux?
I know he needed money.
Did he ask Miss French for money?
No, he was too clever for that.
Did he help Miss French with her business affairs, with her income tax returns, for instance?
Aye, not that there was any need of it.
What do you mean by not any need of it?
Oh, Miss French had a good clear head for business.
Were you aware of what arrangements Miss French made for the disposal of her money in the event of her death?
Oh, she'd make a will as the fancy took her. She was a rich woman with plenty of money and no near relatives. She used to say to me, I have to leave the money where it do most good, Janet. Well, once she left it to a cat's home, and once to a dog's home, and once to an old folks' home. But it was always the same. She quarrelled with the people. Come on, tear up the will and make another one.
Do you know when she last made a will?
It was on October the 8th. I heard her talking with Mr. Stokes, the lawyer, saying he had to come round tomorrow if she wanted to make another will. And the prisoner was there, kind of protesting, saying, no, no, no. And Miss French said, oh, but I want to, dear boy. Remember when I fell under the bus, or almost fell under the bus? It could happen at any time.
Do you know when your mistress made a will previous to that one?
In the spring it was.
Were you aware, Miss Mackenzie, that Leonard Vole was a married man?
No, and neither was the mistress.
I object. What Miss French knew or did not know is pure conjecture on the part of Janet Mackenzie.
Let us then put it this way. You formed the opinion that Miss French thought that Leonard Vole was a single man. Have you any facts to support that opinion?
Well, there were the books she got from the library. There was the life of Baroness Burdett Coots and the one about Disraeli and his wife. All about women marrying men much younger than themselves. I knew what she was thinking.
No, I'm afraid we cannot admit that.
Why?
Members of the jury, it is possible for a woman to lead a life of Disraeli without necessarily contemplating marriage with a man younger than herself.
Did Mr. Vole ever mention a wife?
Never.
Thank you.
I think we all appreciate how very devoted to your mistress you were.
Aye, I was.
And you had great influence over her.
Aye, maybe.
In the last will that Miss French made, that is to say the one made last spring, she left almost the whole of her fortune to you. Were you aware of that fact?
Of course, she told me so. All Crooksy's charities, she said. Expenses here and expenses there, and the money not going to who I left it to. I'm going to leave it to you, Janet, she said, and you can do with it as you think right and proper.
And that was an expression of great trust on her part. In her present will, I understand, she has merely left you an annuity. The principal beneficiary is the prisoner Leonard Vole.
It'll be a wicked injustice if he ever puts a hand on that money.
Miss French, you say, had not many friends or acquaintances. Now, why was that?
Well, she didn't go out much.
When Miss French struck up this friendship with Mr. Vole, it made you very sore and angry, didn't it?
I didn't like to see my dear lady imposed upon.
But you have admitted that Mr. Vole did not impose upon her. Perhaps you mean you did not like to see someone else supplanting you as an influence on Miss French.
She leaned on him a great deal, far more than was safe, I thought.
Far more than you personally liked.
Of course, I've said so. Mind you, it was of her own good I was thinking.
So, the prisoner had a great influence on Miss French, and in turn Miss French had a great influence, had a great affection for the prisoner.
That is what it had come to.
So that if the prisoner had ever asked her for money, she would almost certainly have given him some.
I have not said that.
No, but he never received any money from her, did he?
That may not have been for the want of trying.
Now, returning to the night of October the 14th, you say that you heard the prisoner and Miss French in conversation. What did you hear them say?
I didn't hear what they actually said.
You mean you only heard the voices, the murmur of voices?
They were laughing.
You heard a man's voice and a woman's voice and laughter. Is that right?
Aye.
I suggest that is exactly what you did hear. A man's voice and a woman's voice and laughter. You didn't hear what was said. What makes you say that the man's voice was that of Leonard Vole?
I know his voice well enough.
The door was closed, was it not?
Aye, it was closed.
You heard the murmur of voices through a closed door, And you swear that one of the voices is that of Leonard Ball. I suggest that is mere prejudice on your part.
It was Leonard Ball.
As I understand it, you passed the door twice, once going to your room and once coming from it.
Aye, that's correct.
You were, no doubt, in a hurry to get your pattern and return to your friend.
No, I was in no particular hurry. I had all evening.
What I'm suggesting is that both occasions you walked quickly past the door.
I know what I heard.
Come, Miss Mackenzie. I'm sure you don't wish us to. Sure you don't wish to suggest to the jury that you were eavesdropping.
I was doing no such thing. I've better things to do in my time.
Exactly. I think, Miss Mackenzie, that you recently applied for a hearing apparatus.
Aye, that's so.
So your hearing isn't very good, is that right? But when I say to you, Miss Mackenzie, that you could not possibly recognize a voice through a closed door, what do you answer? Could you tell me what I've just said?
Well, I can hear no one if they mumble.
In fact, you didn't hear what I said, and yet I'm only a few feet from you across an open court. And yet you say that behind a closed door with two people talking in an ordinary conversational tone, you definitely recognize one of the voices as that of Leonard Ball as you swept past the door quickly on 2 occasions.
It was him, I tell you. It was him.
What you mean is that you want it to be him. You have a preconceived notion.
Who else could it have been?
Exactly. Who else could it have been? That was the way your mind worked. Now, tell me, Miss Mackenzie, was Miss French ever lonely on her own in the evenings?
No, she was not lonely. She had her books in the library.
She watched the television, perhaps.
Aye, she watched the television.
She was fond of the news or a good play.
Aye, she liked a good play.
Wasn't it possible that on the evening when you returned to the house, what you really heard was the television on, and a man and a woman's voice and laughter? There was a play called Lover's Leap on the television that night.
It was not the television.
Why not?
The television was away being prepared that week.
It must have upset you very much, Miss Mackenzie, if you thought that Miss French was really going to marry the prisoner.
Of course it would upset me. It was a daft thing to do.
For one thing, if Miss French had married the prisoner, he may have persuaded her to dismiss you.
Oh, she'd have never done that. Not after all these years.
But you never know what anyone might do you? Not if they're strongly influenced by anyone.
Oh, yes, he'd have used his influence. He'd have done his best to have made her get rid of me.
I see. So you felt that the prisoner was a very present threat to your life at the way at the time.
He'd have changed everything.
Yes. Very upsetting. No wonder you feel so bitterly towards the prisoner.
Leonard Friend has been at great pains to extract from you an admission of vindictiveness to